background. I've just concluded a lifetime since around 1980 of working in conflict resolution and communication skills training. So I've facilitated a lot of groups. And, so if you have any of your, what would I do if this were to happen questions, you can put those to me. Imagine yourself in a group. What would that be like for you? What are your hesitations? What are your confidences? You may have things that you're quite confident you can do in a group. Anyone want to share what your experience has been and how you feel about taking this on? So I'm going to stop talking now, and the floor is there for anyone who has a question, comment about communication in groups. And you should be able to either type a question into the chat or unmute and raise your question or your comment. Have you done a group like this? Have you tried to bring up climate to others? And what has happened when you've tried to do that? Maybe, Petra, you're still with us. Beth McKinley, I'm not sure, might be with us. Otherwise, it looks like our team. Brian, you're doing, do you want to say a little bit about what you're doing with the Climate Champions program and maybe some tips that you have gleaned from that program that you want to share?
The advice we're given is to begin by listening to people and finding inroads to our topics in what people's concerns are. I can share my good fortune. I'm having a Zoom meeting tomorrow morning, a second one, and it came about because I spoke to one person who helped convene this group of people that he knew were interested. So there are about 8 of us, I think, that will be meeting tomorrow morning, and some of them are very knowledgeable, more knowledgeable about certain technical matters than me. But anyway, the lesson I learned was that one person can put you in touch with other people who hopefully will put me in touch with other people. So it can snowball. But just when you're inviting somebody, ask that person, if they're interested. Do they know people who would be interested? So I'm looking forward to tomorrow as a second opportunity to talk to these folks.
So every encounter that you have is an opportunity to grow the network of people that are concerned and engaged. And so it's great that you have that opportunity tomorrow morning. And your tip is, let's listen first to what people say. And it was mentioned earlier tonight to look at like if they want to talk about cars, talk cars, if we talk about EV cars, or you start with where they are. So that thing of listening is so important. It's definitely something that Catherine Hayhoe talks about in various videos that are on her channel too, if you're wanting other tips like that. Any other questions or comments? Petra, have you tried to facilitate a group or pull a group together for a conversation? If you want to share what that was like.
Doesn't look like she's listening.
No, maybe not. She's thinking, but anyways, Sharon, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'd say that one of the interesting experiences I had was I was picketing outside a bank downtown in the sort of fossil fuel divestment action with 350, and there was an opposing set of pickets that had come in from Alberta and Saskatchewan. They'd obviously been recruited to come in, and they had a really loud speaker. Anyway, one of them was a couple were standing a little bit further away holding their signs, and I started a conversation with them about it. And I was curious to know, how they felt about, what was happening where they were. And it did not take very long to get to the point where the woman of the duo was willing to talk about the fact that she was really, yeah, things were getting weird on her farm and there were issues. And she was just worried that all of the Ontario policies were going to ruin their way of life and destroy their farm. So it was really surprisingly, just being curious about why she was there and how she felt. Like she was relatively open. So I'm thinking, I'm often intimidated from talking to people when in fact they'd be quite willing to talk. So
Yes. And
this is
somehow or other, you must have asked an open-ended question that helped her get to how she was feeling about where she lived. Yeah, how she felt impacted. And so it could be, how are you? And so she said something about being impacted by Ontario's decisions or by the financial district decisions.
yeah, the idea that it was that the action on climate change was threatening her life
Yeah.
and more than climate change.
And
So
then
and how can I blame her? It looks like that depending on where you are. So
yes, and one little tip for that is if you do get an answer to an open-ended question, then you want to follow the questioner. So then it sounds like somehow or other, Sharon, you were also able to invite her to speak about what she did, what she was concerned about for her farm. So she was able to talk
exactly,
about her.
exactly. So she became very aware. Yeah, she was concerned. It was getting harder to choose your crops, and there were issues of water and like all that stuff. So and she heard herself say it. So no matter what, she'd said it and she'd heard it. So that's often impactful, I think, to people.
So thank you for sharing that, Sharon. I think the technique here is open-ended questions and genuine curiosity about what a person might be experiencing. So we don't need to get defensive or judgmental. Judgmental gets in the way of curiosity and doesn't really open the doors to understanding. And it's true what you said, Sharon. We don't need to agree on everything. We can still understand each other. That's one of the principles of conflict resolution is understanding comes first, and then you may find areas of common agreement. In these kitchen table conversations, we don't usually try to convince people who are deniers or who are at the session to kind of disrupt it and doubters, let's say. So we do need to clarify with people coming, it's fine if they don't know very much, but we want them to be involved in a problem-solving conversation, a sharing conversation, understanding that there are changes happening to the climate and that those are having impacts. And those are what we're there to explore. But I think one of the tricks of facilitation is remaining positive, no matter what kind of energy other people might be bringing to it, and just hearing and receiving what they have to say, and then getting back on track, the track that you want to be on, regardless of where they might want to go. So you hear what they have to say, you thank them for their comment, and you say, here today is what we're trying to do. So then you kind of move it back to the conversation that you had planned for the day. So that's sort of something we can do in facilitation. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else is interested. I don't know, Petra, if you had a comment or question you wanted to make. I don't know if Beth is on the line and wants to ask any questions, make a comment. I think our tech team people are all busy. Timar, are you there? Are you busy or you want to contribute? Please feel free.
I'm hearing you now, Lynn.
Are you, Timar? Okay. Yes. Would you're hearing the conversation. Do you have any question or comment that you'd like to make?
Well, I think it's, let me just turn on my video now. All right, there I am.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what's important though is based on my interaction through the Africa Climate Action Initiative, there's a general awareness and commitment towards, climate change.
Mhm.
And I believe that what needs to be done or what should continue is ongoing public education, ongoing enlightenment, so that persons can really see the benefits associated with playing their part in terms of climate change. And in addition to that, I also do believe that in terms of outreach, engagement, as well as support, whether it is in the form of projects, development, etc., it should be done so that person's level of awareness can be improved and can be increased, because we need that wide scale outreach. Because at the end of the day, if we can get more persons to come on board, then more than likely the impact will even be greater.
Thank you. Reaching out is going to lead to greater impact because it's going to engage more people. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, sorry. Sharon, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to something that somebody raised earlier in the sessions about whether or not we would reach out to people who were in positions of power or influence. And I think it was in the group I was in with Val, there was a comment that, many people who are in a decision-making role don't necessarily know a lot about it, about climate change, and they, it's worth having those conversations even with people you might think would be well knowledgeable and making decisions based on information they get from experts. So that sort of supports the lobbying idea. But even in that case, even if the person's sort of political alliances don't seem climate friendly, there's always the value of having the conversation because it kind of reduces the level of alienation and antagonism between an environmental advocate and somebody who isn't necessarily committed to that. So I think reaching out to people who are on the denier edge of things might not be so bad if they are in positions of decision making and you're speaking as someone who might be influenced by their decisions, and you're doing it in a way that is respectful and attempting to understand their perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. I think I'll just share a little story that I was visiting a friend in a small town near Algonquin Park, actually, where she lived, and she was relatively new, but she's very environmentally aware. She was speaking to a neighbor. We were out walking, and she's trying to make friends with the neighbors. And it turns out that they're looking at a gas furnace, a new gas furnace. I think it was something like that. And she mentioned how she was trying to rely on wood burning, I suppose it was how she's relying for the winter in her little house. And the conversation became one where she was able to say what she was concerned about. So we sometimes call that an I message. She said, well, I'm concerned that relying on gas means we're going to burn more fossil fuels. This person had never heard this idea before, that maybe so-called natural gas, we might call it fossil gas, was an environmental problem. So it was a new idea for that person. And she just did it in a way where actually they had some common discussion first. I think they both had adult children living in other places. So they talked about how they were and so forth. And it just sort of arose naturally in that conversation. But I thought she was quite masterful at how she gave some information without it sounding like she was being positional or judgmental. And that is really the key thing, that people don't feel that they're being judged for where they are, and that you're being genuine. You feel that you can express your concern, but without requiring any particular response from the other person, just trying to keep it friendly and respectful. So Linda and Alan, I see that you're back. Would you like to add anything or ask a question?
I was just going to tell a little story too. In Peterborough, we have a wonderful woman who started a butterfly marathon, and
Wow.
she gets runners. And last year, they ran from Peterborough to Mexico. to follow the monarch butterfly. And it's just a wonderful way into conversation with people. She also works on building gardens, and again, butterfly gardens, and again, it gets people talking about without being threatened. It really works.
Yes, people love nature. So anything to do with nature, the outdoors, trees, butterflies,
Well,
that's a very important way to engage people.
she worked on these marathons. She'd have good runners run 50 kilometers a day, and then they arrange them all through the states into northern Mexico, which is great, especially central Mexico, where the butterflies are.
The other thing that this brings up, Linda, is the importance of personal stories. People really relate to something that you're trying to do yourself or some interesting aspect that you're involved in. So you're not telling them how to think, you're telling them about your experience and what you're working on and why it matters to you, why you care about it. And then you can find out more about what the other person cares about, what they notice, if they have kids, what they're thinking about for their future, that kind of thing. So I have a feeling that people are starting to come back now. So it looks like that. But we can continue our conversation if anyone would like to share while we're waiting for groups.
I'm interested in your perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I might say something at the risk of ending on an odd note, but I have a neighbor who shares quite a bit with me in the sense that she has recently had a grandchild, her first grandchild, as did I. And I met her one day and I was feeling very dark about climate. I can't remember. It was probably the provincial government, and I said something to her. I said, it just does me in sometimes when I think of what the future of these two children that we care so much about is going to be. And it was as though I had punched her in the gut. And it was said in a way that was kind of just sharing an anxiety I was feeling. And it was really not a good thing. So, that was a caution to me that to recognize that it's a very powerful subject, even if you think you can just have a casual conversation about it.
Yeah, that's people can have deep feelings stirred up, and they might be feelings of resistance to wanting to think about the how the future might look. Like people would rather it look good, and thinking about how it might be bad if we don't act now is hard. And so people can resist that, or they can feel fear, grief, any kind of emotion. And the important thing, if we're trying to promote dialogue through that, is to receive that emotion and just hear it. We don't tell them that they shouldn't feel a certain way or they should feel a certain way, but we just recognize how they are feeling, acknowledge it, use it as a learning moment, and then say, what could we do next, or what could we do about that? And, it's also possible to recognize the person believes something you don't believe and just leave it there. The group will see that they'll see where you're at, they'll see where the other person's at, they'll see that you respectfully heard what they said, even if you say, that's not the information I have, or, I hadn't heard that, or whatever. And then you say, let's go back to what we have to offer here tonight, slides that we have. And yeah, so it's staying centered. It's like breathing, staying with yourself, being especially sort of free of other worries at the moment if you're facilitating your group. Like sometimes when we get into trouble in conversations, it's because they kind of land on us as a bit of a surprise, and we're not ready to kind of be our best communicator. But if you're hosting a conversation, you will have yourself set up to try to be the best listener you can. And despite whatever technical problems you might have, you can still just hang in there and bring people with you, because as you've all been patient with our technical problems tonight, I'm sure that people you invite to a Zoom conversation will be as well, and they might even have be able to help if there's a problem. And again, our team is there to help. So if you feel like the technical is not something you can handle and you want support the first time or second time you want to do a Zoom conversation, we're happy to provide technical support. Thanks.